everybody. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. I'm here with my co-host Nick Olson. Nick, how are we doing today?
I'm good. We got the Bizarro Vikings this year. We're 0-3, and yet I think we're an above average team. Betting markets actually have us as an above average team. So it's like the inverse of last year's Vikings. We're losing all our one score games, and yet I think this team could actually turn things around and go on a pretty good run. So it will be fun to dive into this Panthers game and preview, or dive into this Chargers game and preview the Panthers game with you.
Yeah,
We've ground the all 22. Excited to get into it.
yeah. The betting markets have us as a better team than Green Bay Packers, so we got that going for us, I guess.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, really. I
I mean,
mean,
if you've watched Jordan Love, you can't argue with it.
no. All right. Yeah. Let's hop into the game. We're trying to keep it a little bit faster here tonight. So we'll get into the offensive side of the ball first. I think you're coming out of the game. What's the reason the Vikings lost? It's the mishaps on the offensive side of the ball, right? I got three categories here. The first one is the clock management at the end of the game and at the end of the first half. Honestly, they didn't do a great job of getting down the field in a 2 minute drill there. TJ Hawkinson, part of that in the first half, obviously had the drop at the end of the game and the fumble at the beginning of the game um, to kind of bookend it for the Vikings there on sour notes. And then finally, just the red zone. They made four red zone trips. They scored one touchdown. They kicked a field goal on the other one, and they went four and out, and then threw the pick on that very last play of the game. So, just three kind of very important situational football things, right, that the Vikings didn't get right, and it ultimately cost them the game, pretty much, in my opinion. We'll kick it off with the clock management, and I guess we'll talk about that last play of the game, because for me, Nick, that frustrated me a lot more than the interception did, personally. What do you think we should have done there? Should we have spiked the ball? Should we have just run a play faster? Or what do you think we should have done?
I don't feel strongly, but I think the better move is to spike the ball. The idea, I guess, the advantages to going for it when you've got the clock less under a minute and you're in the low red zone is you catch them off guard and you kind of know what kind of defenses they're going to get into. So maybe you're more likely to get a look that you really like. So there's strategic reasons to do it, and obviously, you want to catch them off guard. Vikings have used tempo really well before last year, but also this year to get off some really nice plays. And if you clock it, you're getting rid of one play, so you can run three more quick passing plays or whatever, but you don't get a fourth bite at the apple. In theory, if you were to run a play quick, you could run a bunch of quick fades or whatever and manage to get four bites at the apple. So I mean, there's reasons to go behind it. Obviously, we got one bite at the apple, and it was drop, tipped, and intercepted, and that was
Yep.
the end of the game. Um, I think probably clocking it is better because I don't especially as an offense I feel like it kind of behooves you to have the extra time to plan things out and maybe package a few plays and get ready to go up there and try a few different things. But like I said, I don't feel strongly about it because I do think there are advantages. Like the defense has to rally in there. Maybe you don't want to let them substitute guys in for goal line or something. So and I liked the kind of I guess I don't know. I don't feel too strongly about it. So I know a lot of people disagree with it, but I think at the end of the day, like the play was fine. The trying to get another play off instead of clocking it was I disagree with it, but not strongly. And the result was terrible. But like Kirk put the ball in a location where it was a catchable throw, and Hawkinson just wasn't able to reel it in. And then compounding the bad luck as the ball was tipped up in the air like a volleyball, and somebody was able to intercept it. So kind of bad turn of events, but I wouldn't judge it necessarily. Process wise, I don't hate it so much. Obviously, results wise, it lost us the game.
Yeah, so the thing I don't like about it, like I'm fine with running another play there. The thing I don't like about it is it took them about 25 seconds to get that play off. Like when you're in a hurry up situation like that, the clock's running, you have zero timeouts. You need to be able to get up to the line of scrimmage, get the play called, and get it out in like 15 seconds. Like 20 seconds should be the max that it takes you, and that's a slow process to me in that type of scenario. Now I think one of the things that might have hindered them is a lot of times when you're in hurry up situations, you'll have two plays called in the huddle. One is the first play, and then the next is the second play. It was fourth down before that, so they were probably more focused on getting it right for fourth down and converting them, and then even giving themselves another chance. So I doubt that they had two plays called in that huddle, right? And it's basically confirmed after the game when Kevin O'Connell's trying to get the play call into Kirk's headset, and Kirk couldn't hear him or whatever. So Kirk ends up calling the play by himself, which was the same play apparently Kevin O'Connell would have called. The problem for me is the decision making process from Kirk between I can't hear my coach and then actually getting everybody together to call the play took too long. I also thought there was like no urgency from the team to get the ball off to the refs and run another play. Like if you saw after the play, T.J. Hawkinson just kind of got up and lackadaisically like they kind of huddled on it. Like it was an overall team effort more than that to me that frustrated me in that situation. You know, a spike you should have down in 10 seconds, but you do get one less attempt at the end zone, right? You would get 3 attempts instead of 4 attempts at the end zone if you're able to run all the plays. Um, in the way it turned out, the Vikings wasted so much time that they probably would have only gotten 3 attempts at the end zone anyway. So the spike would have been beneficial because it just got them more time to get together. But that was the frustrating part to me. And then before the half, I don't think there was anything necessarily wrong with the way they operated up until T.J. Hawkinson wasn't able to get out of bounds, and that was a good play by the defender to prevent him from getting out of bounds. But it's just like a tough situation when you waste all that time, at the end of the first half, don't get a chance at a field goal attempt, and then realistically, at the end of the game, if they had gotten that field goal attempt in the first half, that's all they would have needed to win the game, and it would have changed how things played out because they would have kicked on fourth and goal instead of going for it on fourth and goal. So it's not really a 1-to-1 comparison, right? But both clock management situations are kind of stick out to me as a pivotal point in the game, so it's worthwhile to bring up.
Yeah, and that end of first half drive was frustrating because it felt like Staley was very comfortable just giving away the check down or the flat route underneath or the stick route underneath and letting them like sure have 5 yards. You got less than a minute left, so sure take it, whatever. Vikings were only able to get 3 plays off plus the Hail Mary at the end, which they just barely got off, and then was just it was dead on arrival. So
Yeah,
uh, that obviously great, like you said, great play by the defense keeping Hawkinson inbounds, but like Cousins threw to Hawkinson in the middle of the field or in the flat route inbounds 3 plays in a row. You would like to see, can we get like a deep out or something? Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson proved, Addison proved, and we knew about Justin Jefferson. They are very good at running those routes. Maybe we would, we love those flood concepts. This would not be a bad place maybe to whip one of those out. Hopefully get something, push the ball downfield out of bounds too, rather than just
yeah.
be like, okay, sure, I'll take 5 yards here, 5 yards here. Oop, where did the clock go? Oh no. So it was frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. And defenses, are trying very hard to prevent you from getting out of bounds in those situations. So it's not the easiest thing in the world to do that. But I agree. A dump off in the middle of the field and then trusting the guy to run out of bounds is a lot harder than like if they're giving you free access releases, take the free 5 yards and step out of bounds real quick. Something like that. The second thing I think we need to talk about is T.J. Hawkinson in general, maybe, but like obviously he had the fumble at the beginning of the game where he was stood up, right, and the guy just was able to out strength him and rip it out of his hands. That's kind of a fluke thing where a tight end is going to be in that situation a fair amount. And then for me personally, the interception at the end of the game, like that's a really difficult catch. Yes, it hits him in the hands. Yes, it's good ball placement from Kirk. It's actually excellent ball placement from Kirk because it's only where T.J. Hawkinson can get it, right? But that doesn't mean it's an easy catch for Hawkinson, right? He's got the defender draped over him. He's dealing with contact to his body while trying to make that catch. And unfortunately, the ball pops up into the air. The thing that has kind of annoyed me a little bit is people are like vastly overreacting and acting like T.J. Hawkinson is a bad player because of this, right? Like, it's just wild to me because there are multiple options in this game. There was a really nice, I guess it's called wide choice. It just looked like a tight end seam route to me, but there was a really nice explosion off the line of scrimmage from Hawkinson on the tight end screen out. Heck, the play before that, he won on Y option against a safety, right? He goes inside, beats the safety,
Which was the
gets
fourth
wide
down.
open,
Yeah.
converts a critical fourth down. If he converts that and then we score a touchdown, TJ Hawkins is one of the heroes of the game, right? Even though he fumbled early on. So I think he's still an excellent tight end, especially on the receiving side of things. And this game doesn't blemish him for me all that much. I just want to know your feelings about it too.
No, I mean Justin Jefferson fumbling the ball out of the end zone last week doesn't mean Justin Jefferson is no longer
Yeah.
like an all-pro wide receiver. No, I mean that was a crucial play that was probably you could pin the loss. I mean there were a lot of things that went wrong in Philly, but you could pin the loss on that Justin Jefferson fumble. That doesn't take away from how good he is. In fact, in that game we saw it. And it's the same story with Hawkinson. Like, yeah, when you're going for the extra yards after catch, put 2 hands on the football. Don't let it, them take your lunch money. Um, the at last play of the game, like it's a contested catch. Like nobody wins 100% of those. Like you can't in all honesty expect the offensive player to make that. In the end zone, like this is, you get a big tight end like that. That's what the Y is supposed to do for that contested catch and the catch radius and the catch point ability. But like nobody's gonna bat 1,000 if they call them 50-50 balls. So if you're bringing in 50% of them, you're usually doing pretty good. So I don't fault him too much for that. I wouldn't even call it a drop really. It was a contested catch that he wasn't able to reel in. And it was unfortunately turned into a tip drill interception. So I mean obviously the fumble hurts his stock a lot, but like I think this game, you're right. This game proved we saw a lot of routes, and we've seen a lot of from Hawkinson this year that I think proves like yes, the Vikings made a very savvy choice to trade for him last year. He's an exceptional route runner, especially for his size. There just aren't very many players in the NFL who have the agility to sort of like his burst on a post route or a glance route or like even on like a stick China route or something. He's really good, and we've seen it over and over. Like he's becoming a go-to target for Kirk Cousins on critical downs, and when you match him up with a safety or a linebacker, he just shreds them with his route running. So, and he's been a good blocker too. I mean, he's not Josh Oliver out there, but he's like able to get in the way and sort of seal guys effectively on his own run. So, you can line him up in line and not worry about it. So, he's a good player. He's a really good player. And this game doesn't change that for me.
Yeah, no, we're on the same page there. And like he's not Travis Kelsey, right? There's one Travis Kelsey that exists in the world. And I guess he's quote unquote the highest paid tight end, which even by the money he's not actually the highest paid tight end. And also, if you cap adjust things, he's like the fifth highest paid tight end. That's where he should be in the tight end hierarchy. I know we paid him a lot of money, but he has performed up to that contract so far this season, I think, is where I'm
Yeah.
at.
And he's also really young. Like most of the elite tight ends in the NFL are over 30. Hawkinson is what, 26?
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about it.
So the next pain point for the Vikings, I think, in this game is the red zone offense. Right, we score on our first red zone drive, we kick a field goal on our second red zone drive, our third red zone drive, or our first and goal drive. Right, I guess all of our red zone drives were first and goals, but we end up going 4 and out. And then our final drive, obviously, in the goal line situation, we only have that one play that turns into an interception. Right, so in the red zone offense, do you think this is a systemic issue? That's something like because I've seen people just lambasting Kevin O'Connell's red zone play calling, right? What do you think on it?
No.
Yeah,
No,
okay,
not
yeah,
at
me
all. I
neither.
mean, this is Kevin O'Connell was like famously like elite in the low red zone last year, like play after
Exactly.
play after play. And we went into that on this podcast, and you can go back and listen to those podcasts or search our old tweets. But like the play design in the red zone has been good. I don't. There's, there may be a couple times where I'm like, I'm not. This looks like just kind of a vanilla thing, and I feel like you could do something extra to help the offense. But like there was a mesh call on what I think it was our fourth drive where it was I was third down and it was wide open and
Yeah,
you had I think it was Madison doing
it
the
was.
crossing route across the field and it was a 2-by-3 set. It was 3-by-2 and the trip side everybody is doing the screen on the mesh. So you got two crossers one after the other and then like a spear route from the other guy. We might have gone over because Vikings did this last week too. And this play like Madison's wide he's got a walk-in touchdown but Joey Bosa just demolishes Brian O'Neill and gets his hand on the ball, or it pressures Kirk Cousins, and Cousins gets pressure at the top of his drop. And there are a lot of people on Twitter saying like Cousins needs to step up, even though Tua Pelotu was right there in his face. Like, yeah, we've seen there are times when a quarterback can like see pressure coming and abandon their drop or
Yeah,
whatever. Seven step is a lot. If you want to criticize Kevin O'Connell, there's probably too many seven-step dropbacks in this offense. Kirk is taking a long time to throw. But on that play, it was a really good play call, really well designed, really well executed. Should have been a touchdown. But Brian O'Neill just happens to give up a pressure. Who Brian O'Neill, also a really good player, had a really rough game. So, it
yeah.
happens. Whatever. Like a lot of things need to go right on offense. So I'm not worried about the red zone offense at all. That's not a concern for me. Red zone offense in general is very fluky. It's not the teams that are good in the red zone year to year. There's a lot of noise and a lot of variance in that. So I think Kevin O'Connell's play design is good. I think they've just sometimes you get pressured on third downs and you're not able to execute, and that happens. It's a small sample size, but it swings games. Same thing with like third downs. It swings games, but I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, no, I agree overall. And I mean, like, the only teams that are consistent year to year are the teams with the, like, hyper elite quarterbacks, right? Like, Patrick Mahomes of the Chiefs are always going to be great year to year in the red zone offense. But
Yeah.
a lot of other stuff, the Eagles probably are always going to be good because they have such a strong offensive line and running game and that sort of thing. And they're able, whenever they get the ball on the 1 yard line, it's just an automatic touchdown for them, right? So, there's a lot of things that go into it. That first red zone failure, right, where we kicked the field goal, all three of those plays, I thought the Vikings should have had a touchdown. The first one, Madison missed a read. If he follows the
Yeah.
outside zone play to the outside and doesn't cut back, he's in for a touchdown. The second one, Kirk threw behind KJ, in my opinion. I have a bunch of people saying KJ should come back and fight for the ball. I don't really get that.
No, I mean
It's
it was a hard throw to make because
it's
I think that
yeah.
was like the. Go
It
ahead.
it was a half roll, and it was basically okay. We run JJ in jet motion across the field. We get three defenders following JJ because he's Justin Jefferson, right? And defenses are on high alert. KJ Osborne is in man coverage coming across the back line in the end zone. That ball needs to be thrown towards the back pylon where KJ can go up and get the ball and get to and toe tap for the touchdown, right? Kirk isn't able to get the ball there. He does have a little bit of pressure, like it's not the easiest throw in the world, right? So he just barely misses it. That
Yeah,
is what
but
it
the
is.
throw was there,
Yeah,
so
it was there. And then the Madison one you talked about, that's wide open for a touchdown if he doesn't get pressured. And I don't put that one on Kirk either. Like you were saying, like that's a loss to the offensive line to me. And even if Kirk had wanted to step on that up on that play, I think Ezra Cleveland got beat a little bit, so he really didn't have the space to go anywhere. Um, and then honestly, the second red zone possession, I didn't love the play calling. I'm stealing this one from JT O'Sullivan. They ran a sprint right option on it, which JT doesn't like as a play. All offensives run sprint right option. It's where the quarterback rolls out immediately to the one side and basically he's looking to try to find a guy who comes open. That didn't end up working. The one where they got the illegal penalty, JJ just didn't win a route, which is pretty rare for him, but he tried to put a little bit too much sauce on it, I think, and he got stopped there. And I guess it would have been negated anyway. But yeah, overall, I really didn't mind the red zone play calling, especially when I thought they should have had at least one more touchdown based on the way the plays were called. So I think we're pretty good there. One thing I wanted to cover next is that a run game finally showed up in this football game, right? Like Madison had almost 100 yards. The running backs total went over 100 yards because Chandler had 27 or something like that. I think he had 3 carries, 9 yards a carry. Madison had almost 5 yards a carry. So I thought the run blocking was great in this game. Do you want to give us some detail on what you saw from the blocking and how that turned out, Nick?
yeah, rushing offense averaged what 5.4 yards per carry, I think, or maybe 5.2 if
Mm-hmm.
you take out the Kirk Cousins scramble, which is anything above five, and you're in like golden territory.
Exactly.
That's a pretty elite rushing production there, and they did that without, I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think they had any really big explosive runs. It
There
was
was
just a
like a
lot of like
16. There
contained.
weren't anything over 20.
Yeah, yeah, and to be honest, maybe that's kind of Madison's style too. Is he'll
Mm-hmm.
give you 10 yarders, but he's not gonna take the top off and out
Yeah.
outrun a safety down the field for 80 yards or something like Dalvin would in his prime. But yeah, the run game was good. Part of it is I think we have a good run blocking line and adequate backs, and I think the rushing offense efficiency is going to really come down to our defense is keying in on it or not. We saw the Buccaneers were fully gapped out every play, blitzing a lot, and it was really hard to run when every hole is plugged. We saw Staley, is a kind of famous for being the too high safety. We're gonna accept that there's gonna be, we're gonna have to play gap and half technique and use other things to uh, uh, compensate for the fact that we are going to be a little out gap. We're going to leave one gap unplugged, and somebody's going to have to either safety's going to have to fill that from depth, or we have other ways to do that. But the Vikings were able to really take advantage of that, and there were a lot of really really nice run blocks from the offense this game. Well, Schlottman aside, I think Schlottman is kind of the weak link in the run blocking right now, and his pass protection is good. I will give him credit for that, especially for a backup. But the run blocking is not NFL caliber right now, at least. But everybody else, like we saw some really great pulls. This game, we saw a lot of counter, a lot of GY counter or GF counter, GH counter. The counter, the letters in front of the counter here referring to the guard, and F being the fullback, or H being the
Mm-hmm.
H back, or Y being the Y tight, the inline tight end. So you take a counter step one way and then you go the other way. And it's a really nice change up to zone runs because I may have mentioned this before, but outside zone, you're stretching the defense one way, counter, you show them that first step that way, and then all of a sudden, oh, we've got two pullers coming this other way. So it's a really nice way to like sort of get defenses guessing. And they had a lot of really efficient runs that way. They set up duos some well, and they had a lot of just like normal weak zone, strong zone, zone runs. And it was interesting seeing this week that like I think PFF and Sports Info Solutions and ESPN's run block win rate composite all have Vikings as a top five, both a top five pass protection offense and a top five run blocking offense. And the crazy thing about that is I think that's probably right, but also that's without Garrett Bradbury, who is arguably their best run blocker, especially in a zone scheme. I think there's a good argument that Bradbury is their best run blocker, and Schlotman is a really bad one. That's also with Oli Udoh playing most of the game, so I think there's the potential for this rushing attack to be very good. I don't think Madison is ever going to be an elite back who's going to get you, major touchdowns, and you have to work on the fumbling, obviously. And I think the it's gotten so bad that teams are now keying in on this. I think I saw this with the Panthers that they were trying to rip the ball out almost every play just because it's now on the scouting report that the Vikings have problems holding on to the ball. So I think you're going to continue to see teams try and take advantage of that. I have my concerns. Obviously, the Vikings are like last in the league. I think it's still or towards the bottom of the league in rushing efficiency. I think going forward, I project them to be pretty good just because the blocking up front is good. That's going to be a lot more stable than Madison fumbling the ball or guys getting stuffed on critical downs or whatever. So I feel pretty good about the run scheme, which I haven't always with Kevin O'Connell, and I feel good about the run blocking. I don't feel confident in the backs, but I think the run blocking in the scheme matters more than the back, really. So.
Yeah, I mean, and like the fumbling obviously needs to be fixed. And if it's going to continue to happen, Madison deserves to get benched because you just can't fumble the ball at a high rate in the NFL. But in terms of like his ability to execute on the run block scheme that we put in front of him, I don't really have a problem with that. We mentioned the misread earlier. I don't think he does that very often anymore. Like that was a problem maybe earlier in his career, but I think, this game, the vast majority of runs, he's reading it well and he's maximizing the yardage that is potentially there. So, with his athleticism, right? Like you get a player like Dalvin Cook in there, maybe he actually breaks one of these because he's able to beat an angle from a defender, but that's just not the kind of back that Madison is. This is kind of the step down we knew we were going to take in the run game in terms of explosive plays by making Madison our lead back. But I think that with the run blocking being better, it doesn't really matter, right? Like if we execute well on our run blocking, then we're going to be okay as a run offense in general. And I think you kind of went over that really well. And, the dichotomy that we've seen from the Vikings on both sides of the ball in the run game, I think are pretty clear when you're focusing on stopping the run. Or, I think the Vikings let up a ton of yards to the Eagles in the run game because the Eagles' offensive line is really good, and the Vikings were worried about Jalen Hurts. I think those are probably the combination of the two things that caused DeAndre Swift to go off. But the Vikings...
I don't mean to cut you off, but maybe one last footnote to put a bow on the run conversation, or at least my thoughts on it. It's interesting comparing, contrasting Dalvin Cook, especially prime Dalvin Cook, with Alexander Madison. We've gone over why Madison doesn't bring that explosiveness. They kind of got a different approach to contact. They both have good contact balance, but where Dalvin was really good at just making sure guys leave him untouched. He was just very good balance and shiftiness and ability to set blocks or set players up so that he sort of is able to run right past them without losing speed. Madison's different, where he's got good contact balance, but he's not really able to elude contact. He's able to sort of push through contact, and it's sort of it's a difference. Dalvin gives you explosiveness, which Madison does. But what Madison does give you is he gives you pretty consistent yards after contact. He's not going to, he's going to be slowed down by contact and eventually brought down. But I think he does give you push, and I think we saw that in this game. There's like a tight zone play where they converted on 3rd and short. I think obviously they weren't able to punch it in when it was like 1st and goal from the 3, but I didn't necessarily put that on Madison. I thought there were some critical run block failures there up front. So I feel like this offense is it's trading off, those, long 30+ yard runs for being ahead of the chains a little bit more often. And that's one thing you have seen for Madison is he has pretty much put them ahead of the chains. His run success rate is above average, even if the fumbling has caused his EPA per play to be below average. So that's kind of what you get with Madison.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we're pretty much on the same page there. If we flip it over to the passing game, I think there's a lot to talk about here. Obviously, we should probably lead off with Justin Jefferson, who was just dominant once again in the passing game. And this is a Chargers defense that is trying to stop the pass, right? We talked about the success of the run game. We talked about how, in the Bucks and Eagles game, particularly the Bucks, I think they were very focused on stopping the run, right? And that opened a lot in the passing game for us in that situation. Here, I don't think the Chargers were really focused on stopping the run at all. Obviously, they're the Fangio style defense, so they run the too high shell under Brandon Staley. And, there's a lot of zone, there's a lot of mixed coverages, but Justin Jefferson was able to consistently find space. And there's during the game, people were freaking out in the second quarter when Justin Jefferson hadn't gotten the target yet, right? And it's on the first drive, we ran 7 plays, were successful going down the field, and then we fumbled. And then that was our entire possessions in the first quarter. Come on, guys. In the game, we got to be better about realizing when receivers, and Justin Jefferson goes off for almost 150 yards again, right? It's not that Justin Jefferson needs to get a steady 30 yards in the quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? It's Justin Jefferson gets the ball when he needs to get the ball. And there's a drive where we hit him for back-to-back plays for 70 total yards, right? So it's, he's going to get his throughout the course of the game, assuming the opposing defenses aren't dedicating so many resources to stopping him that it is to their detriment elsewhere in the passing game, right? I think that's the lesson we need to take from this.
And that opening drive, we ran it, I think, the first 5 plays. It was a 7-play drive. So they passed it twice. It was duo, wide zone, duo, counter, lead zone, and then a boot, where everybody was covered, so it went incomplete. And then it was the Hawkinson stick route where he got the first down after the catch and got bumped. So 2 pass attempts, 1 completion that didn't happen to go to Justin Jefferson. All of a sudden people are like, oh no, is Justin Jefferson going to all these Justin Jefferson, is he going to demand out because we're 0-3? Oh my gosh, please. I was as attached to Diggs as any Vikings fan. You could probably credibly accuse me of a homer for being how high I was on Stephon Diggs. I was probably right in the end, by the way, because I was calling him a top 10 receiver when people were like, who is this guy?
I was going to say, everybody who said Diggs was better than Thielen, which included both of us back in the day, we were right.
Yeah, and Thielen's going to chance maybe to make us eat our words next week. But for now, we're going to take a victory lap. But in any case, the Diggs trade, I understand that was traumatizing. That's not, par for the course. Justin Jefferson's not the same. He'll get his extension or whatever. It'll be fine. So I would have worried about that. But yeah, let's talk about that long touchdown that Justin Jefferson got. That was just, we talk about how good Justin Jefferson is with his route running, which he is. I think he's a top 5 route runner in the NFL. You could make an argument for top 1. You could talk about how good he is at the catch point, but after the catch, I think he really gets underrated for how good he is understanding angles immediately without even kind of seeing the defense. And that was a case where I think it was a basic route where he was, uncovering underneath and was just sort of running across the field, but he was able to just sort of elude the safety and make the safety take a bad angle by the way he sort of angled his run after the catch. And after that, he was just kind of off to the races and was able to outsprint the rest of the defense. But it was his ability to sort of understand the safety angle that set that up and turned that from a 20-yard gain into a 40-yard gain touchdown. So that's.
Yeah, he understands how the safety's coming down, and he kind of steps underneath the safety to just give himself a little bit of the cushion, but there's an underneath zone defender in front of him too, and he's able to keep enough separation from that guy. It's the Dalvin Cook thing, where it's the curvilinear movement, where he's able to weave in a way where he doesn't lose the acceleration, so he doesn't end up getting caught from behind. And it's always really impressive. And he just moves differently from other human beings, even on the football field where they're hyper athletic, right? And it's just so obvious when he runs routes and even after the catch that I think that special movement is there for him.
Yeah. Good player.
Yeah, no, Justin Jefferson, good player. Thanks for listening to the Kindred Skulls podcast. That's all we have to say today. No, so one of the other things I like about the offense is, we are still having inconsistencies, right? We're going 3 and out and stuff. I do think we were a bit better in that range here today, with the exception of taking sacks around midfield, right? We had 4 of those. But outside of those plays, which are on a mix of things, and I think a decent chunk of them can be attributed at least a little bit to Kirk, we continually get explosive plays. We had the Justin Jefferson touchdown. We had two other big explosive plays to JJ. We had the KJ Osborne touchdown. We had a couple other plays where, we're getting 20-plus yard gains, which is really pretty impressive from the offense. The KJ was a kind of a similar situation to Jefferson where it's a crossing route and he's able to run away from everybody. I think there was man coverage on that play. Am I wrong? I don't remember exactly off the top of my head right now. But I'm just really impressed with what Kevin O'Connell's dialing up and how open all of these receivers have been getting downfield all year, because it's been happening in every single game.
Yeah, I think O'Connell has a really good understanding of how defenses want to stop the Vikings and how he can counter those. And we saw that really last week with the Eagles, but we saw it this week too with the Chargers. I don't think you saw it as much, or as a fan, you might not have seen it as much because I don't think Cousins was quite as good as he was in the Eagles game. But I do think guys are getting open. And it's interesting. I feel like O'Connell's doing a lot of things that the nerds would appreciate. I think he is he's top 5 in most pass heavy offense in terms of pass heaviness over. Like, obviously, Kirk Cousins leads the league in pass attempts right now. So by definition, like, we're very pass heavy. But part of that is because we've gotten behind in games and have been trying to come back. So those are the situations where we're naturally going to be more pass heavy. But even adjusting for that, the Vikings are one of the most pass happy teams in the NFL. You saw a little bit less this week because, the Chargers were kind of giving us favorable run looks, and it's good that you have an offensive coordinator who's not just going to pass for the sake of passing, kind of like John DeFilippo did back in the day, but is going to take what the defense gets him and was going to take what gives him the most yards consistently. So, but also Kirk Cousins right now has the 6th most dropbacks as a percentage that are play action, and that's really where you're seeing a lot of these shot plays, and they're designed well. That you've got multiple. You're kind of doing. It's not the same time every time, but it's a lot of like basic routes over the middle of the field or a post route, variations on Yankee. But sometimes you'll have a deep hook or a deep curl in the middle of the field. So it knows where the soft spots in the zones are going to be and kind of attacks them pretty surgically. There's maybe too many boot floods that at this point I think a lot of the NFL, especially you saw this in this game, like the NFL knows how to stop boot floods and knows how to flood their defense as well. So I could maybe do without so many of those because there's a lot of them. But the rest of it I think is very well designed, and you won't necessarily see it on like an efficiency chart or like a DVOA rating. But I do think the Vikings are very explosive. And I think as the season goes on and there are fewer fumbles just by virtue of the fact that they're not going to fumble 10 times every 3 games. You're going to continue to see a really efficient, explosive offense. That actually, Vikings, interesting fun fact, right now everybody's talking about the Dolphins, the historically efficient offense. The team in the NFL that is second to the Dolphins in yards per play is your Minnesota Vikings. So they're getting the yards. It's just they're just not getting the touchdowns because they're turning the ball over, which that's also important. But yards are good too, and yards are probably a little more predictive in terms of how the efficiency of the offense is going to happen going forward, because red zone performance, fumbles, these things are a little fluky. So I'm content.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like like you're saying, like, first of all, the Vikings have not recovered any of their fumbles that they fumbled on offense, and you usually recover fumbles at the 50% rate. That's baked into DVOA. That's been long discussed in terms of something that happens. But even considering that, the Vikings are fumbling a lot for a football team. Like, I think if we'd lost 4 fumbles so far, or whatever it is, which would be half of our fumbles, that's still way too many to have through 3 games, right? So we are fumbling at an absolutely absurd rate, and that's something you have to hope comes back down to earth, right? Turnovers are very fluky, but they do matter. They matter a lot in terms of the individual outcomes of games, right? So it's kind of that dichotomy where it's like, well, we can't necessarily expect the turnovers to repeat themselves, especially on the fumble side of things. But it's also the reason why we're losing these games. So it's kind of like, well, we need to fix the fumbles, but I don't even know how we do that, right? Other than make people hold the ball all throughout the facility and try to hit them with brooms or whatever. I don't know. But why don't we flip it over to Kirk Cousins? I wrote a piece kind of comparing Kirk Cousins' performance in this game to Justin Herbert for zone coverage. It's on my Twitter. You guys can go check it out. Go to zonecoverage.com to read it. And I, in that piece, kind of talked about, I thought Kirk played pretty well in this game. Like, I don't think he was elite by any stretch, but I really think having Justin Herbert on the other side highlighted the differences between what we get in Kirk Cousins as a quarterback who is a very good, let's say 8 to 15 range, depending on who you are ranking him, right? Compared to Justin Herbert, who is an elite quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. And The thing that really glaringly stuck out, there was one route to Jordan Addison that was a deep out route. Mark Sanchez brought this up on the broadcast, where Kirk just doesn't get it far enough outside to Addison. In terms of the timing, like Sanchez talked about it needing to have less of a hitch. Both Herbert and Kirk are doing sort of a thing where they'll hit the top of the drop, and even if they're throwing at the top of the drop, they have a little mini reset just to get themselves like perfectly lined up. That's kind of what Kirk did with that little half hitch in that situation. I'd like to see him be perfectly lined up and be able to throw once he hits his foot on the first hitch, right? But he wasn't able to do that. So in that scenario, he needs to get it further outside because Addison had to come back through the ball, and that allowed the defender to get up and get it out. There's a throw from Herbert to Keenan Allen that's an out route where he does a similar thing and he makes the same adjustment. He just gets it far enough outside that Byron Murphy isn't able to get back into the play. So that's, a separation there, I think, between the two. Is Herbert has a little bit stronger arm because Herbert's got an absolute cannon, right? Like Herbert has a stronger arm than Kirk. He's got more velocity. That allows him to be slightly late, more so than Kirk is. And Kirk has a fine arm, but it's not, that top NFL tier that makes up for a little bit of lateness there. The second thing I want to talk about is just Kirk's play under pressure in general. Like he got sacked 4 times in this game, and definitely some of it was the line failing him. There was one I would count as at least a coverage sack, but there's a couple, one he gets caught from behind as he's trying to escape the pocket. The other, he's trying to escape the pocket and he's got a defensive tackle in front of him and that guy clips him and he tries to throw the ball away, but his elbow hits the ground, right? And that's a sack. And then the other one, I thought he had a slant that he should have just ripped to JJ and been decisive about it. And he doesn't. Whereas on the other side of the ball, you've got Justin Herbert here, and he's making plays where literally he steps up. He's got a very similar play to the one where Kirk got sacked when he was trying to throw the ball away and his elbow hit the ground. He steps up, sees the defensive tackle, and you know what? He throws the ball deep. He makes a decisive choice on a deep route that the Chargers have, throws it deep, gets rid of the ball, right? It ended up an incompletion, but that's better than a sack in that scenario. That's just functionally a throwaway, right? So I'd like to see Kirk kind of do some of that stuff, and I think it was a little bit slow to make the decisions in this game, and that's what ended up causing the sacks. So those are my kind of thoughts on Kirk in this game. Other than that, right, he was dealing in a lot of scenarios. He's very accurate on the JJ touchdown. He's very accurate on the KJ Osborne touchdown. The TJ Hawkinson interception was a great throw. Heck, the TJ Hawkinson fumble was a great throw and decision to get a first down. The Josh Oliver touchdown was a great throw by Kirk, I thought, especially with pressure in his face. There were times where he knew he was going to face pressure. He stood in there and rifled the ball out like Herbert did on the other side all game. So I liked a lot of what I saw from Kirk, but it's just the little consistencies that I think highlight the separation where he is as a quarterback from Herbert.
Yeah, no, I would say I'm very kind to Kirk Cousins generally as an analyst. I really like his game. But the comparison with Justin Herbert in this game is just this guy's doing things that Kirk couldn't dream of. I mean, there's just a lot of examples. One is when we ran Tampa 2, I think it was on the second drive, right before they got that touchdown to the flat, to the tight end.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The throw to Allen in the corner where it went just over Blackman's hands. Yeah.
Yeah, and I pointed this out last week when we were doing so much drop 8 Tampa 2. Like, this is fine, but like there are quarterbacks in the NFL. Like Jalen Hurts missed a corner route to Goddard running just a Dallas Goddard running a corner route because Hurts does not have a big arm. He's one of the as athletic as he is, he's not a big armed quarterback. Justin Herbert is, and he was able to nail that corner route it's a very, very difficult throw to make because you have to throw it all the way to the side of the field, which adds however many yards, 20 yards or whatever, and then you have to throw it 20 yards downfield too. So it's a very hard throw, very far throw, and you got to nail it because that right in that play. He had to throw it over the cover 2 corner underneath, who just nearly gets his hand on it. But Herbert has the arm strength to make that. There's another play where, DJ they have a really nice covered play, cover 1. DJ Wanham beats the left tackle for a pressure and gets his arm outreach as he's riding the arc. And for a lot of quarterbacks, including probably Kirk Cousins, it would have been a DJ Wanham strip sack because he's able to get his hand out, swat the ball down. But Herbert is able to see it from his blind side or feel it. 2 hands on the ball, is able to step up, and because the Vikings were rushing 5, but Herbert was still able to find a rushing lane. He's able to rush for 11 yards and get a first down. So these are things that like Kirk Cousins just can't do. I'm sorry, he doesn't have the arm that Justin Herbert does. He doesn't have the athletic ability that Justin Herbert does. And you saw in this game, like, we think of Kirk Cousins as being like an exceptional quarterback for his mental game, but I think you also saw in this game, like Justin Herbert's really accurate too. Justin Herbert's like a really great processor too. I mean, Flores blitzed him about as much as anybody ever has in the NFL, and Herbert was so decisive knowing where to go with the ball, and he
Oh
knew
my
exactly
goodness.
like the accuracy on some of those deep shots downfield, to like to roast a Caleb Evans or whatever. Like he was making crazy throws. So uh, I can't feel too bad about the loss because a lot of these plays you just kind of have to tip your cap to. You're playing against an elite quarterback who's having one of his best performances in a long while. So, but yeah, I mean, for the people who don't want to move on from Kirk, I get it because I think Kirk's a really good quarterback who gets underrated by a lot of fans because of his lack of postseason success. But at the same time, like you can do better. There are quarterbacks who can do things that Kirk Cousins can't, and it's not. You don't have to hate yourself for dreaming bigger than Kirk Cousins too.
Yeah, no, and like the mechanical efficiency from Herbert down after down after down, when he's getting blitzed and he knows he needs to get the ball out quick, like his ability to get the ball out when he hits the top of his drop, mechanical, put it at exactly the right spot, was just absolutely incredible in this game. Another highlight of the difference, right? Kirk misses the throw to KJ at the end of the game where he's open on the wheel route. After the game, he said he tried to lead him to the front pile and he should have led him in a straight line kind of up the field. He misses that a little bit. You mentioned the Herbert throw, I think, to Josh Palmer down the sideline when Caleb Evans got called for pass interference, and then it didn't matter because Palmer caught it anyway. That throw was absolutely insane from Herbert because he is throwing off of his back foot. He cannot step into that throw at all. And it's like a 35-yard rope that is exactly where the ball needs to be. Like the mechanics of the quarterback being able to throw that just shows that he has an absolutely incredible arm. So yeah, that all combined, I think, is kind of the comparison between Kirk and Herbert. And we've talked a lot about Herbert here, so we're going to flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Herbert and Allen had a great connection all game. I thought early on, a lot of it was cheap stuff that didn't really matter too much. And then as the game got on, the gaps just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And, it kind of opened up, especially for Keenan Allen. That cover two hole shot, absolutely incredible. That was a catch by Keenan Allen. I think PFF put it on Byron Murphy, who they gave like a very bad grade and said had 180 yards in coverage. I think it was on Mekhi Blackman. He was kind of the underneath defender. A lot of the other stuff on Murphy to me was like cheap stuff. There were a couple of good wins by Allen, who, by the way, is a very good wide receiver and particularly a good route runner, and probably a difficult matchup for Murphy in the same way. Like, we talk about Keenan Allen as one of the top route runners in the game, or he's talked about, and he's known for his route running. The thing is, he's also 6'3", right? Like he's a big bodied receiver who can out physical players. So that definitely played to his advantage. Everybody knows Mike Williams is kind of the jump ball physical receiver for the Chargers, but really all of their guys, including Palmer, have that kind of size. So it's something to see there. Anything on Allen, Nick, before we jump into how much the Vikings blitzed on defense?
Yeah, it was. The size is important because I think Allen got a lot of yards after the catch because he was able to generate yards after contact just by the fact that he's a bigger dude than the cornerbacks who are trying to bring him down. We had a few times where guys took bad angles and were giving up yards after the catch, which you can't do if you're going to live and die by the blitz. You got to really be able to rally and make those tackles, otherwise you're going to get shredded. But I didn't think Allen necessarily like embarrassed anybody. I think if anything. I think Staley made some really good adjustments as the game went on. It was like, okay, Flores, you want to blitz me every single time. I've got counters for that. I can set up pick routes. There was like a slant route where they did it out of a stack formation and kind of screened Byron Murphy out of coverage, and it was just a one-step drop, hit the slant, boom. And Keenan was able to get like 11 yards, which is like, that's not an explosive or anything, but when you can do that against like a cover zero look and just sort of guarantee that you're going to pick up 10 yards, like that makes an offense really hard to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was just one example, but like I think Staley was like coming up with examples being like, okay, they're really going for blitzing on 82% of dropback. So here's what we're going to do to counter all those looks you're getting us with the off coverage. So
yeah, no, for sure. And like that slant play is really hard to defend from that style of defense because you basically get a downfield blocker and it's not offensive pass interference because the ball's out so quick that it's caught before the guy even comes into contact with that defender. They ran that a couple times. They also ran it on the fumble that they lost, which would have been a good play. I think they also ran it on the play Mike Williams got hurt, which was a successful play, but Mike Williams got hurt, so that's pretty bad for them. But one other thing I want to mention is the Vikings were blitzing so often, right? And they're getting free rushers so often. Herbert was getting the ball out of the top of his drop. The Vikings knew that. So what do they start doing, right? They start jumping to try to bat the ball down. Herbert released the ball from so many different arm angles to get around defenders in this game and make the completions like it was ridiculous. The Vikings couldn't bat a single pass. You know, Kirk has had problems with batted passes in the past, but just seeing Herbert utilize all those different arm angles and still be able to deliver the ball effectively was really impressive from his side.
We haven't even talked about like the craziest Herbert throw, which is the one across his body to the other side of the field.
Oh yeah, on the 3rd and 17, yeah, that too. That play,
this guy.
I stared at that play like 5 times trying to figure out what the dropback was supposed to be. And I think literally Justin Herbert on that play knew he could pull the Vikings defense to the, like he knew that throw was going to be there because it's a backside dig. And rather than wanting to sit in the pocket to try to sit and hit the backside dig, he knows, okay, I can bail it to the left and make this throw across my body to hit the backside dig if I pull that hook defender, which I think was Jordan Hicks, to the left with my scramble, which is exactly what happened. That's going to be there. I think he kind of like just, you know, galaxy brained all of us to be able to make that play, honestly, because he looked frontside, but he didn't really look frontside. As soon as he stopped his rollout, he looked back and tried to hit that dig. So it's just an absolute masterclass from Herbert. You know, people are probably going to say, well, he should have lost the game anyway because he almost threw that interception. Yeah, okay, he had one bad throw out of like 48 throws and decisions where it was under duress all game, having to make those decisions in a split second. So I think we can excuse him that a little bit. But real quick, I wanted to get in on the Vikings blitzing because, you know, they blitzed 82% of the time, right? That's the stat that's going around. How could the Vikings blitz Justin Herbert 82% of the time? Like, couldn't they know that it wasn't going to work? First of all, I think it's really, really difficult for a quarterback to be as consistent as Justin Herbert was. A lot of times against the blitz, you get what we saw from Baker Mayfield in the first half where the Bucs could do absolutely freaking nothing all game, right? And the Vikings very clearly win that Bucs game, and the Bucs offense doesn't look all that great if the Vikings don't turn the ball over 3 times, I think, as well, right? They scored 17 points without the help of a Vikings turnover. It's not like that's, you know, burning the world down. But I did some numbers and charting of how the Vikings did. So they ran Hawk, which is their, you know, all-out blitz. They're guaranteed to have an extra unblocked defender or some variation of it where they had an unblocked defender, a guy the Chargers literally couldn't block, 18 times during the game. The Chargers were only successful on 6 of those 18 plays. Those 6 came in the middle of the game. A lot of them were like that Keenan Allen slant. You know, they kind of figured a couple things out. I think the big Josh Palmer catch was one of them, or maybe it was the Mike Williams catch, you know, which was just an absolutely absurd catch where Byron Murphy, I thought, had good coverage, but there's nothing you can really do about that, right? So that's only a 33% success rate on those plays, and only one of those plays went for more than 10 yards, right? A lot of those are like 5-6 yard gains or like a 7-yard gain on 2nd and 18 that doesn't really do much for the offense, right? So I did think Hawk was a pretty good answer for them. The problem is you just can't run it every single time. And when you go down, when the Vikings blitzed, but they didn't get an unblocked defender, you know, the Chargers started to get pretty successful. So Herbert hitched on only 3 of the 18 plays where the Vikings ran Hawk. All 3 of the plays where he hitched, one he scrambled, the other times he hitched once, were unsuccessful. One of them was the sack that Danielle Hunter just batted the ball out of his hand, right? So, you know, if Herbert's not being mechanical and delivering those balls as soon as he hits the top of his drop, it's a non-issue on Hawk, pretty much. Like, the Vikings were able to shut it down. On the plays where the Vikings blitzed but didn't have an unblocked blitzer, the Chargers did a great job picking it up all game. There's a lot of credit that goes to that offensive line for being able to pick up everything the Vikings were throwing at them. He was able to hitch on 11 of those, and he was successful on 16 of the 23 dropbacks that he had, right? Where the Vikings, you know, blitzed him but did not get everybody there. So that's leaving open holes in zones. You know, that's a number of different things. He only ended up with 7 dropbacks where he didn't blitz. Technically 8 dropbacks where the Vikings didn't blitz. One of them, they sent all 5 down linemen. I don't consider that a blitz personally. PFF will consider it a blitz because it's more than 4 rushers as a definition. On those 7 pass attempts, The one was the scramble that we already talked about. He got 12 yards on that. On the 7 pass attempts, he completed 6 of them for 111 yards. Right? So the Vikings' best option was to send an all-out blitz against Justin Herbert. They weren't successful doing absolutely anything else in this game, and I think that also speaks to Justin Herbert's ability. We talked about that Tampa 2 dropback, right? That's one of those pure zone dropbacks. Herbert just shreds it because he makes a phenomenal throw that not a ton of NFL quarterbacks can make. Now, the Vikings face a murderer's row of high-level NFL quarterbacks this season, right? We've got Mahomes and Burrow coming up on the schedule, so it's not like the Vikings won't face incredible quality high-level quarterbacks. But I do think that this won't be a consistent issue game after game after game for the Vikings because we're just not going to face somebody who's quite this good every single week.
Yeah. Yeah. On the bright side, though, we held their running backs to like 1 yard per carry, which is coming out of the Eagles game. I think a lot of people were worried, like, are the Vikings just going to get run over week in and week out? And like, no, it turns out when the Vikings make the decision to actually play gapped out, they have a really good run defense. So I was not concerned about it very much coming out of the Eagles game, but it's nice to have the confirmation that like, the Chargers only ran it like 11 times or something.
Yeah, they didn't
like,
try very hard, but
if you take out the Herbert scrambles, Josh Kelly averaged 1.1 yards per carry on like 7. Their longest rush by a running back was 6 yards. So that they were very, very good in the run defense. There wasn't a lot of it, and the Chargers were happy to be like, okay, you're gonna give us this cover 0 look every down. We're gonna throw the wide receiver screen like literally over and over and over again. And the Vikings were like, fine, you wanna keep trying us on the numbers on the wide receiver screen because you think you have numbers, but you don't because of Caleb Evans plays it really well, and you'll only get like 3-4 yards. We'll take that. We're still ahead of the stick. So that was kind of how, especially early in the game, that was kind of the flow of the game. It's like there's just so many like, okay, here's my quick blitz counters, and the Vikings were like, we've practiced for those and we're good against them, and we'll take it. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, an elite quarterback playing at an elite level, not every time will you play an elite quarterback who plays up to his status, but this time Justin Herbert really had like a, this is going to be a game I think that Herbert stands are going to be talking about for a very long time. So
yeah,
bad luck, but you got to tip your cap to it. But I do think there are some positive takeaways, and I don't think, I mean, there are times when I am critical of Brian Flores. There are times when he runs spot drop zones where I'm like, this seems like a recipe for, quarterbacks in the NFL are too good. This isn't, like college. Like quarterbacks in the NFL are going to find a hole in the zone. But I think generally, I liked the defensive play design. But, sometimes, good players are going to beat good play calls. So.
Yeah, so one quick question on the Eagles game, because, obviously I wasn't on the pod last week. I was on vacation. I didn't get a chance to really watch that game back. I know, from what I've seen just on videos and stuff, that we had really light defenders in the box, and the Eagles were kind of able to dominate us on that front. Was it that we were trying to drop out a lot, and they were able to kind of get some momentum there, where this game we were maybe a little bit more aggressive against the run? Because we weren't, putting in super heavy personnel all game here. We still kind of have dime sort of stuff or like big nickel sort of stuff in the game, and we're just putting that, did trying to defend against Jalen Hurts maybe make a difference in that Eagles game as well? Like, I'm just trying to see what the difference in terms of how we played it on defense between the two games, if there was one. If it's just, well, the Eagles are really dominant in run blocking when you have light bodies in the box, that is a totally valid answer too.
Yeah, I think with the Eagles, they were so concerned about the Eagles' passing attack and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts and Jalen Hurts' ability to make things happen when he's given enough time, that they just kind of went all out in a dime package, and were very, very light. And we're playing. I mean, you watch the All-22, and I was just like, Brian Flores, you're insane. Like, anybody else, I would say this is terrible defensive court, because he had one defensive tackle out there and was playing like -2 in the box, or -3 if you're counting Hurts as like an extra player, which you should. So,
yeah,
you got Ivan Pace out there and three outside linebackers and Jordan Hicks, and you got Harrison Phillips. And surprise, surprise, they're going to run it down your throats 10 plays in a row. And Brian Flores, I think his takeaway was, we'll take 5 yards a carry if it limits you, to like not Jalen Hurts not passing all over us. And that was just the sort of the approach they took. And I think we're seeing from these few games, like, Brian Flores doesn't really care about unpredictability. He cares about what is the best strategy to beat this team. We're going to run that. We're just going to keep running that. We're going to So the best strategy to beat the Eagles is we're going to be blitz heavy and we're going to have lighter personnel and we're going to rally to the ball. The play with Justin Herbert is we're going to blitz all the time. We're not going to give him any time to throw. And so long as we keep things in front of us, we're going to limit the explosives. We're going to limit. So I think that he worries about different things in different games. And he says, if the Eagles beat us with 5 yards a carry, I'll take that. You can win games where you're giving up 5 yards per carry on the ground. With the Chargers, we were shutting down the run. And we were just risking those explosives over the top and Justin Herbert making crazy plays, which if you're going to lose, that's not the worst way to go. So yeah, I don't know the Eagles run fits will forever be a mystery to me. But
Yeah.
I think we've learned that Flores focuses on one specific thing that he wants to try and shut down at the expense of things like, if they're going to beat us with X, Y, and Z, which is their bad, if you're going to beat us with your wide receiver 3, fine, whatever. We'll live with that so long as we can shut down A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So,
Yeah, he's not scared to do, and maybe the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? And expecting different results. But he's not scared to do the same thing, and he's not scared to throw the book at opposing offenses, right? In terms of blitzes and that sort of thing. And that's what we get with Brian Flores as our defensive coordinator. Like, that's who he was in Miami. He kind of has been as advertised so far, I think. And, part of it's maybe some of the pieces are failing, right? He doesn't have Byron Jones and sorry, what's the other guy's name? Xavier Howard there in Miami, who were just lockdown man corners, right? And that really helped propel the defense. We don't have a Christian Wilkins on the inside who's kind of wrecking stuff on the interior. We've got one quality pass rushing defensive lineman. So I think that's definitely setting us behind a little bit there. But I do think we're kind of getting what we paid for with Brian Flores, right? Like, I think we are getting what we should expect. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't end up working out, it is what it is. At least we kind of set a philosophy and we stuck to it, right? Like, I think the Donatel thing, it just wasn't taught particularly well. This, I think, is going to be more execution failures on individual players than anything. Like, at the end of the day, you can scheme up everything you want, but the players have to go in and win the game. So let's flip it over to the Carolina Panthers. We're going to wrap this up pretty quick here, I think. One thing I saw today is that Bryce Young practiced in full. I think it was in full. I'm not 100% sure. He's dealing with an ankle injury. Obviously, the rookie quarterback, they have Andy Dalton in there, the Vikings killer, if he isn't able to go. An interesting thing about Bryce Young that I've seen is that he has like one of the longest times to throw in the NFL so far this year, and Andy Dalton had a really quick time to throw against the Seahawks last week. So that's kind of a dichotomy to watch there. Obviously, we were talking about how Herbert got the ball out so efficiently and so effectively. If Bryce isn't confident in what he's seeing, and I liked Bryce as a prospect, but he's still a young NFL player. So if he's not feeling fully confident in what he's seeing, the blitzing might be very, very effective against him if we force him to hold on to the ball just a little bit longer, because he's not as comfortable as Justin Herbert was just getting back there and mechanically firing things. I also don't think the Panthers have as good of receivers as the Chargers do. I hope Caitlin Thielen isn't listening to this, so we don't give them any extra motivation. But obviously Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are great receivers. The Chargers, even like behind Adam Thielen, there's not a lot, right? Like DJ Shark and Jonathan Mingo. I liked Mingo as a prospect, but he was a second round pick, and I thought he was maybe more of a third or fourth round pick. Like, I liked him in that kind of range, right? So I don't know if he's going to be a quality day one starting receiver. But yeah, so I'm kind of looking forward to hopefully playing Bryce Young, because one of the things at Alabama was he's a playmaker, right? He's really dynamic, able to make guys miss, and he also he reads and processes things well. But I think that extension ability is something he prided himself on. So if he's got a little bit of a hurt ankle, he's not going to be as good in that area. And the Vikings have been really good at corralling that sort of thing, or with their all-out blitzes, should be able to get to a guy who's trying to be more in creation mode than just mechanical get rid of the ball mode.
Yeah. Young is, I think, good prospect, obviously. But he's a rookie quarterback who is also maybe a little injured. And there's going to be just a time there are very, very few rookie quarterbacks. It's such a difficult position to translate to the speed of the NFL and how much more condensed things are in the NFL and how much tighter the windows are, how much narrower the field is. So there's just an adjustment period, and it would be one thing if we had, Brock Purdy slotting into the 49ers weapons with the Shanahan offense, but this is not that. This is when Adam Thielen is your wide receiver one, and not even prime Adam Thielen, but past his prime Adam Thielen. Sorry, Caitlin. It's not the most. I mean, these are NFL players. You never want to like talk them down. There are ways that this team could beat us, but you look at the roster, especially the offense, and there isn't anybody who necessarily scares me. I mean, DJ Chark. These are bigger receivers. They all play pretty big. And Chark at least has some speed to take the top off defense. But like if you're looking at this passing attack, this is probably one of the weaker passing attacks we'll see. And Young, as you know, despite the draft status, he's not Justin Herbert. He is not a toolsy quarterback. He does not have above average arm strength. He does not have above average athleticism. His ability, he's just very poised and accurate and kind of knows where to go with the football, or at least he did in college. But the NFL is a different beast, and their offensive line is not good and banged up. And so this is a lot of combinations of factors where, again, these are NFL players. This isn't like Bama versus, some, Division III team or something. But this is I don't see a lot of players on this team that inspire I mean, like, Ike Ekwonu is going to be probably a good player. So we'll see. But like, you know, you got a left tackle who might be a good player. That's maybe your promise. I don't know. Well, Bryce Young might be a good player eventually. Right now, game 4 of his rookie season, I don't want to jinx us, but there isn't anything here that I'm like, oh well, Brian Flores really needs to focus in on this to shut them down. So.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, yeah, I've always liked Taylor Moton, who I think is the right tackle. I'm not really sure if he's even in favor on that team anymore, but I just. Nobody on the offense scares me. Adam Thielen actually had a very good statistical game last week, 11 for 145 and a touchdown. The Panthers also lost by 2 scores, and they were down against the Seahawks pretty much the whole game. So at the end of the day, I'm not really super concerned about the Panthers being able to do what the Chargers did to us this last week. So I think you want to come in, honestly, with a pretty similar game plan and see if Bryce Young's going to be able to beat the blitz. And maybe if he starts to pick it up against the blitz, you switch something up and try to confuse him with all the crazy zone drops that Flores ends up doing, right? Try to throw a bunch of stuff in his face. But at the end of the day, I think we should be able to hold this offense to a pretty mediocre day. On the defensive side of the ball, they've got a couple players that I like. I think Derek Brown has really come on recently. Brian Burns, I've always been a big fan of. I was a big fan of him coming out of Florida State. I think he's been a very quality, especially as a speed rusher, NFL player. So given that O'Neal had a bunch of issues last week with rushers, that's a little bit of a concern if he's end up going up against him. And then Jeremy Chin in the secondary, I think, is probably somebody to shout out. I think he had 2 defensive touchdowns the last time we played the Panthers because, we just love to turn the ball over, I suppose. But, so I don't know if he's like a high level individual player, but he can make plays on the football, right? So those guys on defense, especially with our turnover issues with Chin, are something that concerns me. Or if our offensive line decides it doesn't want to hold up, particularly on the interior, even though we've done well so far this year in general, that's a concern. We tend to drop back, deep passing plays. Like, that's why I feel like it feels like Kirk's under pressure, because I think we're passing so much that, when we have 5 to 10 pressure plays in a game, from a percentage perspective, is actually not all that high, but it feels like a lot just because you're counting the number of plays, times he's been hit or whatever, and they show the graphic, oh, Kirk Cousins has been hit 6 times this game or something like that. So I'm kind of rambling there, but hopefully we're able to shred their secondary like we've been able to everybody else in the passing game so far this year, is my expectation.
Yeah, Derek Brown's a really good player, and with against guys like Ezra Cleveland, maybe even Ed Ingram to an extent, Garrett Bradbury if he's back. Bradbury I think has gotten stronger and better at capable of handling power rushers, but like Brown is a very, very powerful big man. So you do those 7-step play action dropbacks, and he's the kind of guy who's gonna push your guard into the quarterback. So he's a really good player. And he's an even better run defender. So duo kind of scares me running into this front. Brian Burns, an elite speed rusher. We saw him beat Christian Darrisaw a number of times the last time the Vikings played the Panthers. So really good player, in the conversation for, I think, a top 10 edge defender, and wins very fast, like blink of an eye fast. So he's very good. So like the defense, I kind of insulted the offense a little bit, but the defense does have some dudes up there. I just think the back seven is banged up. Xavier Woods' safety is out for them. So they've got C.J. Henderson, who was drafted in the first round, but then was traded, I think, for a fifth rounder. Hasn't really lived up to his draft stock at all. They got Dante Jackson, who's the other outside corner, who he was kind of like a mid-level free agent signing for the Panthers, but then I think he tore his Achilles last year, and now he's kind of hobbling back a little bit. So this is not, this is not the best back seven that the Vikings are going to see ever. So I do think there's a little bit of softness in the secondary if they can find the time with Brian Burns and Derek Brown rushing at Kirk Cousins to get some of these deeper developing plays downfield or take advantage of the coverage. I think could be a good game for Justin Jefferson. I think this could be a good game for TJ Hawkinson. A lot of times it's kind of like pick your poison, but I think in this instance, I think everybody's going to have a good matchup on the passing offense. So maybe not the best game to necessarily expect another 100-yard rushing game for Madison, but I do think there are weaknesses and holes in the secondary that they could take advantage of.
Yeah, for sure. And they have J.C. Horn, too, in the secondary. It was a top 10 pick by them. But his career has kind of been marred by injury, so I don't have a great bead on how he's actually been as a player in the NFL. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for our show today. So I am Matt Freese. You can find me at Fries Football. He is Nick Olson. You can find him at Nick Olson NFL. Our co-host Greg is at You've Been Gregged. We are at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. Just search for Kindred Skulls on YouTube. And we, of course, have a link in our Twitter bio to that. So, Nick, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Beat Mads article on zone coverage. Go check it out. You finished the pod, so now you got some homework.
Absolutely. Skull Vikings, everybody.
I would love you. Go, baby.
The first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score the